Good morning, everybody. My name is Stephanie Long. I am personally very excited about the applications that AI can have in the healthcare and commercial sectors, which are the sectors I lead for Amazon Business. I heard, and I'm still hearing, a lot of questions from my customers, some of you in the room today, about how to think about the most promising application in AI. Second question is, when do I know when my organization is ready to run for the race of AI? And thirdly, what are the human implications of AI? Shall I be worried? Shall my team be worried about AI? To address this question today, I'm very happy to host Stéphanie Lapierre, CEO and founder of TealBook, which is a leader in supplier data and e-commerce procurement. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for flying to come and see us today. And to start with, can you please tell us more about yourself and about TealBook?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I did fly from Italy before coming here, so a little jet lagged. As you mentioned, I'm Stéphanie Lapierre. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called TealBook, and we use AI to deliver quality data at scale to any procurement organization. So we'll talk more about that. I'm also originally from Quebec, so you'll hear a slight accent. I'm a mother of 3 daughters. And I've been on this tech journey now for about 8 years. Prior to that, I had built a consulting business building procurement functions for hyper-growth companies. And so I've lived in your shoes. I've thought about how do you build a procurement function that is transparent, scalable, enabled stakeholders to do better, to make faster, better decisions, and deliver true value for the organization. And so my inspiration for TealBook came from that personal journey working with hundreds of different companies of all sizes and all kinds of technology stack. And what I saw is that as they implemented systems and tools that it's, to automate invoicing, payment, contract, sourcing, et cetera, is I start seeing that there's a lot of disparity in information. Each of those systems required quality data. And it also, if every system depended on suppliers to come to a portal or humans to update information, what I start seeing is a lot of just disparity and siloed information, and very difficult to not only drive more compliance to those systems, but also to make the information readily available. And so, a long time ago, I started seeing this is not a software problem. At the time, there's already quite a few software availables now that completely scale at another level. People are there to drive value. They want to do more to deliver value for their organization. So it was not a people problem necessarily. It was not also a process problem. Often in procurement, we over-process things. What I saw is that it was really a data problem. And if we could solve this data problem, it would actually unlock an enormous amount of opportunities and deliver more value for the organization.
Thank you. Super inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. I want to come back on something you say. You say, I've been in your shoes before. You have yourself at TealBook implemented AI very early on. When and why did you do that?
So in the first version of TealBook, I knew the problem we wanted to solve is to deliver quality data on suppliers at scale. All the attributes that we need, all the information consolidated into one entity, if we could make that happen, it could be game-changing for procurement. It could give procurement an enormous amount of visibility and create alignment with other functions as well. And so what I didn't know is how, right? And so at the beginning, when we built the first version of TealBook, which is already 7-8 years ago, we built a LinkedIn-like application. And the thesis was good. If suppliers came to one LinkedIn that's really user-friendly, into one profile and populate their information, we could distribute their data across multiple customers, and they would be motivated to come back. And what we found out is actually it's very difficult to motivate suppliers to come back. Even come the first time, if they get paid, they may come to be onboarded, but it's very difficult to get them to come back because there's hundreds of different portals that they have to update. And what we saw is customers wanted better data, more data across more suppliers, which would not be able to achieve if we depended on suppliers to do the work. I was really fortunate at the time that I met a CTO that had spent 10 years at Ariba, so he understood the business concept of building a supplier network the traditional way, but then had gone back to school to study big data and machine learning. And for the first version of TealBook, I remember with my own money, I had bought Dun & Bradstreet data on 1.8 million records. And it was about like $120,000 out of my pocket. And we could never implement it into the first version of TealBook because the structure of the data and the quality of the data was not good enough for us. And at the time, the CTO said, you know what, there's so much data in the world. These are businesses that want to be known. They update a lot of different information, that is their website or multiple different databases. I think we can use technology to actually go grab this information from multiple sources, make sense of it, attach it to the right company, and create these digital profiles, removing the dependency on suppliers or human to update, and then also improve the quality of the information, and even eventually validate the quality of that data over time at a scale that humans couldn't possibly do. And so we embarked in that journey in 2017. We raised our first round of funding, and we built this version of TealBook that started collecting information autonomously, we launched with 600,000 supplier profile. We're now at 6 million, and we have an average of 75 attributes per company that's being monitored. And we're now in the process of launching the next generation of our platform that's really focused on transparency. We're applying a trust score next to every attribute, and that's because of the opportunity that we have with the technology and how much has advanced even since we started. So we can now collect information at a speed and scale and automation that it would be absolutely impossible to achieve without using AI.
Thank you. And so you started by yourself in your company to use AI to have better quality of data, fresh quality of data. Since then, you have supported many customers already. Can you tell us about a few use cases that you find the most interesting in the procurement space?
So when we had a bit of a chat earlier, and there's a customer of ours that's in the audience and speaking today. And I'll use him because I think he was speaking to our team about 3-4 weeks ago, and his experience is so tangible. The catalyst, and every company that we know and work with have a catalyst for a moment where they decide to invest in a data infrastructure, building a data foundation. They realize how foundational it is to be able to achieve digital procurement success. In this case, it was the CEO asking how much money they were spending with a really important supplier because the CEOs had a meeting the following week, and procurement were not able to answer the question on time. It took a couple of weeks because they have multiple systems, they have different instances of the same supplier. They couldn't get the information with a confidence level that they want to give to the CEO. And the CEO also asked, do you know how much money we're spending with them? And they didn't have access to the AR data. And so in that moment, this was a few years ago, it was sort of this is completely unacceptable. Like, we delivered no value in that really important discussion and negotiation because we didn't have access to the data. And so they embarked into this journey themselves at the time. Now we're partnering to get them to the next level, but they have invested in this infrastructure. Once they had visibility into the information, another use case was that they start seeing with a supplier multiple instances of different contracts. And so I think it was equaling, don't quote me any fees here, I'm sorry if I'm misquoting, I think it was like $1.2 or $1.3 million, and if you added all these contracts, but it didn't make sense. All these different businesses had made decisions on their own, and they're able to have visibility to consolidate all these contracts into one MSA, and then they reduce it down to like 200,000 or something like that. So we're talking about hundreds to about $1 million in saving, and that's one supplier, right? So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. We have experience with this where we remove all the duplicate, consolidate under the right entity, where customers have saved $30, $50 million very easily on having just that visibility. And then you talk about the cost. And yesterday I was talking with a CPO, I was like, I actually don't know how much my team is doing to give me access to the information that I need. And it's possible that they spend, 80 hours, maybe over the weekend, to make sure they get me the information. I know it's incredibly manual. Mm-hmm. And so the same customer talking to our team was talking about unpacking the process for them to get spend analytics. It happens every 2 weeks. It's a recurring exercise. They have to export the data from their vendor master. They buy from third-party providers. They have to deduplicate, cleanse, validate the data, match it to the right entity. So the problem here is not quality data. They get quality data, but it's the time and the expense that it takes to get this recurring event over and over again. And when we unpacked the cost, it was about $1.5 million or just over $1 million a year just to get this access to spend reporting that they had confidence. So we're talking about bare cost of just to get spend analytics. Think about all the other requirements for all the different parts of the life cycle of a supplier, how much money goes into a lot of those processes just to collect the swivel chair between systems, the validation of record, the matching of record for your ESG reporting, for your spend reporting, for your diversity reporting, and then think about just the impact on a lot of systems that you buy that may be sitting on shelf or not being optimized because they depend on quality data to be fully delivering on their promised value. So, and I can keep going on. There's hundreds of different use cases, but these are real examples of powering the procurement team with information. And maybe one more use case that I love from our very early days. One of the use cases that we launched with the legacy TealBook was discovery, because if we had all this data and all these suppliers, we're able to directionally propose alternative suppliers that are most alike the suppliers that you're working with today. And that powered sourcing teams to be able to find alternative suppliers within sometimes minutes to a few hours, which beats sometimes getting back to the business within 2 to 3 weeks. And if you can create that kind of value, it's quite impactful. But in this case, someone in the business was about to renew a contract with a piping supplier, and the category manager asked, is it possible, can we ask other suppliers to bid? And the business pushed back and said, no, there's only one supplier in our industry that can do this type of piping. And the category manager pulled TealBook and said, actually, I looked on TealBook and there's 6 other companies that are servicing our sector with the same type of piping. Do you mind if we invite them to bid just to make sure we're getting the most value? And that conversation alone led to $25 million in savings. Right, so now just think about all the opportunity missed because you don't have access to your data. It's pretty incredible.
That's massive. The saving of time that it represents is exceptional for the organization. If I may, any personal use cases that you like with AI, either for you within your company as in your personal life?
AI is really exciting. At the beginning, even 4 years ago, we were still doing webinar on what is AI, what's machine learning, what's the differences, how do we train models and things like that. And what's exciting is the advancement and how more mainstream it is. So we don't have to educate as much. I think the education comes more from we're using AI to solve a very manual process, which is getting access to good quality data. But there's a lot of use cases in your personal life that I love. I travel a lot, and I love traveling, so ChatGPT's become my favorite app because you can refine. And the first search may not be the best, recommendation, but the more you refine, I like cozy place with really good food, good services, things like that. And it actually does a really, really good job of helping me plan my trips. And then the other one that I know you liked is, 3 years ago, I think was my last headshot. I had to book a photographer, a studio, get my hair and makeup done. I got to pick my outfit, spend a day getting headshots and spending time, figuring out which one we're going to use. And my most recent was actually done in 25 minutes for $20 on my way from the cottage to my house, approved by my kids using AI, right? So those are ways that you can leverage. There's a lot of ways that are safer. Just even doing RFPs. Actually, I've seen customers using ChatGPT to draft really good RFPs. There's a lot of, contract as well. There's ways to be able to review terms of contracts. There's a way to consolidate information that's really helpful, but it also, it presents some challenges, some fair challenges that I think, everyone needs to be aware of, especially when you're using AI in a business setting.
Thank you. So seems like a ton of personal, but also mostly professional use cases and application for AI. So any routes or journey, if someone in the room is willing to embrace this journey, where to start? What are the steps?
Well, so what I would say to procurement, I just came back from DPW. I don't know if I can't see hands, but if anyone was in Amsterdam, it's a really exciting time to be in procurement. It's also a very daunting time because there's so many options, and it's like everything changes, right? COVID was all about finding alternative suppliers and mitigating risk. Then Black Lives Matter happens, suddenly supplier diversity becomes really important. Then carbon emission goals, and then now you're starting to look at sustainability. Then inflation, you're flipping to cost savings. It's the same with technology. There's all these really cool, ChatGPT was, 6-7 months ago? And now it's intake orchestration. It's never going to change, right? There are always going to be these trends. that are going to keep happening, and there's some that are really important to leverage, and you need to seriously consider them. I'm really biased in my view, but I do think the strong data foundation is critical. The analogy I often use is when you buy a house. Sometimes it's easy to buy the house because you love the house and the kitchen looks nice, etc. But if the foundation of the house is sitting on a swampland, and it's not done well, you're going to spend a lot of money trying to fix the house and maybe even have to redo the entire foundation, and that's going to be more painful. So I think if you start with a strong data foundation, it's a huge win. What we're seeing in trends, and I posted recently sort of the perception of the CIO to procurement function, and you can see a big divide between how the technology organization is thinking and the business procurement is thinking. And we're seeing a lot of procurement teams jumping on all these tools, which, I know it's really exciting, but they're buying a lot of tools, and the tools comes with automation. Some comes now with their own sort of ChatGPT version of it. And you're starting to creating Frankenstein architecture. It was already Frankenstein-ish, but it has the potential of becoming even more disparate, more challenging. If you're using ChatGPT on top of different software by different users, you're now going to train multiple large language models. And it's not benefiting the organization. It's not making the organization more intelligent. And so in our more mature customers, what we're seeing as a trend is leveraging the data lakes that the organization already has. So if it has Azure or Snowflake or whatever technology, it's leveraging also the BI tools. If you have Power BI, or I'm not trying to promote anything, but most of our customers are using Tableau or Power BI. And then looking at implementing a data platform enables them to collect internal, external data, match it to the right entity, fill it with all the attributes that are available, put more control and governance based on the trust score, what data that you need, where does the data go into, and then you can actually just integrate that into your data lake that's connected to your system and your BI tool. And what that enables is the data that goes into the data lake, it's much broader. You're going to have maybe customer data, you're going to have contract data, logistics data, other things that, leveraging large language model trained on that will make the organization much smarter, will also serve a much broader set of use cases for the procurement organization, and also that can be benefited by other organizations like sales. Like the balance of trade is real in a lot of sectors. The power of negotiating based on how much money you're spending with suppliers is also real for procurement. And those opportunities today are missed because the data is so disparate. And so that's sort of my advice, is just looking at those trends. If there's an opportunity to leverage what you already have, it doesn't need IT resources like we used to. So that can be a barrier to say, it's really hard for me to get IT resources. But positioning procurement as overseeing hundreds of millions to billions of dollars in spend, and so much opportunities to drive corporate value and achieving corporate goals based on being able to capitalize on that spend, should be the positioning for you to get the investment and get access to those technologies to be able to drive, sort of a better, more digitized procurement function. And then there's a plethora of fun technology, but if you have that foundation, what it enables you to do is for different needs, different functions, different workflow, you can build, much easier to build today. You can buy, new tools. You can also change those tools because the technology will keep changing. So you're not locked into this massive implementation, have to live, with data sitting in a software that's dependent on, the process of suppliers coming and getting used to it, one portal, or employees, how they're using it. You can actually make it more flexible, more interchangeable. You can adopt new technologies and make sense of it with a feedback loop, again, that makes the organization more intelligent. And that will improve time to value of your technology adoption. It will drive better compliance, better ROI out of the investment that you've made in tech in the first place. So again, my biased view, but we talk with a lot of procurement teams right now to understand sort of what are the biggest trends and what are the people that have failed trying this. If you haven't gone into this transformation yet, you should learn from and avoid, because those mistakes have been incredibly expensive, and some companies have spent 5-7 years trying to build an infrastructure that's still not there yet, and it's not delivering value because they haven't. They're start now looking at technology that's available to be able to achieve this, which was not available 5-7 years ago, right? So this is a really exciting time.
Exciting time indeed. And I want to build on something you say, which is about We want to avoid this Frankenstein foundation, and we want to look at the data first, and we want to invest some time. It does not require IT resources, but does that require a lot of time and energy? Is that better to start this race when we are already, like, the procurement function is well-staffed or already advanced, or is that really for any type of organization with any type of size of procurement team?
Yeah, I think the baseline, if you understand your spend, like understand who you do business with, that should be phase one, that you're a small procurement organization in the early stage of your transformation. There's a lot of opportunities. There's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit to be able to show value really quickly. It also will drive your strategies. If you have a lot of overlap in some categories or a lot of duplication, or maybe you don't have enough suppliers in certain category where you should be considering, introducing more competition to drive more savings opportunities. I mean, it unlocks so much value, and it set up the stage for you to have better analytics and then be able to achieve, and adopt new tools. So I often say that, like, oh, we're not there to, we're not quite there yet. We're still trying to figure out the tools that we've invested before we think about data. And I urge to think the other way around. If you start with data, it will make the adoption of those tools so much better and faster. If you're a more advanced organization and you've already embarked on this journey, looking for ways to just accelerate. And what we've done in the past year and a half is partnered with 5 companies at different level of maturity with different technology stack to help guide the next generation of our platform that's coming out February 1st. And that's been really tremendous because we've learned with different maturity, different technology stack, different use cases, how can they implement something like TealBook that's much easier to implement. It's sort of out-of-the-box data orchestration. And yeah, I think, with all of them, it sort of started with the mindset of, I need better data, I need to stop the swivel chair, I need to stop the duplication of manual effort to get information in our system in the hands of our people. So I think there's no stage. I think it's just harder if you're more complex because you have to kind of fix the foundation, with a house or building on top of it versus starting with a clean data foundation and then building on top of it. I think it's going to avoid a lot of, pain and very expensive, I think, investment.
Thank you. I want now to switch a little bit into the human impact of embracing AI. Digitalization has already changed the nature of the procurement function, moving a bit further away from category management, sometimes to more transformation agent in the company to make sure the new tools and new processes were implemented in the company. What about AI? Would that impact the procurement function and procurement leaders and their team?
I mean, yes. And I think we're going to see, we've all been using AI for a long time. This is not new news. It's just gone more mainstream. And so, I just came back from Italy, and I was at the Leonardo da Vinci Museum in Rome. And I was with my 16-year-old daughter, and we're walking through this area where all the machines that he invented, it was about, he invented a lot of things in his short life, but it was really impressive to see. And it was all these machines that just made humans more efficient. It removed a lot of the really hard manual work for humans to be able to move large objects or cut things or print things that would have taken a lot of time for someone to redraw. So it was possible to redraw. It's possible to move a rock or cannon, but he made it a lot easier. And I told my daughter, this is the same thing that we're seeing today. These are just, tools. They're machines that make us more efficient. One of the machine was having 2 operators to operate 8 cannons in war. Like, it was a war machine. So think about just the amount of people it would have required to be able to operate these cannons versus having 2 humans that are just, So think about, it's the same concept, right? These are just machines that we're using. They're just tools that make us more efficient. It's just harder to understand sometimes, or it may be scary because you can't touch it. It's not like a box or something that you can see. These are digital machines, but they're getting smarter and faster, quickly. And what I do think, and I'm pretty convinced of, is there's a compounding effect of starting to invest in that kind of technology now, especially when you're talking about data and intelligence, because it's moving fast. And the faster you can leverage those technologies and those tools, the faster you can make your your employees, your team more efficient and deliver more value, you're going to see a big difference between those companies to build, companies that are more competitive, more sustainable, more scalable in a world that's going to keep changing. Things are going to keep coming at us. We're going to have new requirements, new disruption in all kinds of ways. Things are not going to slow down. It's not going to go back to what it was. I think there's always been disruption, but I think we've seen now change and disruption in a way that we've never seen it before. And so how do you prepare your people for this? How do you prepare your organization for this is something that I think we all have to consider. And then how do we make our own personal lives better, right? I didn't have to spend a day in a studio for a headshot. I was able to do it with my kids in the car, in a few minutes. And so these are all opportunities that we can implement and think about. What do you do day to day? If you're more in sort of category management or sourcing, or you're like an individual contributor, even if you're a manager, what is your team doing that's repetitive, that's manual, that's not using their brain, that you could automate? And these are all opportunities to leverage technology to automate. And then, you're not going to fire them. You're going to move them to more strategic task or work that they can deliver more value. And so the more you're able to automate some of these things, and you're seeing a new generation of people that we hire. My kids don't have tolerance for repetitive, manual, mindless work. They want to automate things so that they can do more. And so you're going to have a new generation of people that are going to demand, more strategic, more high-value impact work. And so we're going to be forced as an organization to adopt these technology, embrace them, and just elevate procurement to be a function that, optimize capital, an enormous amount of capital that goes to suppliers that are providing goods and services that are absolutely critical, right, to the organization. And if you can optimize the money spent, also the management of all those relationships that are so critical, to leverage them in a way that, again, drives more value to the organization, I think we have a real chance of changing the narrative and make procurement sort of a really critical function to optimize those kinds of relationship and make the organization more competitive.
Sounds a very promising statement, and looking forward to actually do that and see many customers do that. We are nearly at time, but maybe if we have to close on maybe 3 advice that you have for the audience, if they want to start right now in procurement, what should they do?
Well, I think I just mentioned it. Like, I think about what do you do day in, day out that you could automate. Break down the process. If you want to think about data, how do you make this tangible? Don't think about, and this is against a lot of advice that you're going to hear, but if you think about the use case first and try to automate the use case, you're going to end up with a lot of different automation and different tools that are going to have different purposes. If you're thinking more about data, it will enable hundreds of use cases. So it's a bit of a different way of thinking, but I would really encourage you just to look at what do you do, what does your team do, what does the organization do today, and then look at the quality of the information. And we were supposed to ask the question, but I love this question, and think maybe just for yourself, if you were to grade the quality of your data from 0 to 10 today on your suppliers, we're talking about quality and completeness of the information that you need to do your job and to be able to capitalize on those relationships, what would it be? And we rarely hear above 5 or 6, and that's because typically it's just really hard. It's a really hard, complex problem. So with everything that you're doing, if the quality of your data is not a 7 or 8 or 9, think about this differently. Is there an opportunity to automate a lot of the things that your organization is doing to achieve a 7 or 8 or 9? You're not going to achieve perfection, but there's a way to change that. And I would encourage any entrepreneurs, there's a lot of you that have, I'm sure, sort of the bug of being in startups, and it's not for everyone. It's not everyone that has the opportunity to do it. It's really hard, by the way, so if you are considering it, you can talk to me before embarking in this journey. But what I can say is that there's a power in entrepreneurs. And some of you, have this sort of more forward thinking of looking at, what are those entrepreneurs that are building technology, partnering with them. It's a fantastic way to bring new energy, a different way of thinking, and sort of how people are making decisions in our kinds of environment. It's also a great way for you to start looking at how can you impact a product that will deliver more value for your organization. What I can say, startup like us, getting those customers on board, getting the logo, getting the revenue enables us to raise capital, enables us to build better product, also to deliver more value for organization like you. So anyway, big sort of shout out for those entrepreneurs, because I think it's incredibly valuable to our side, and it gives back to the industry. So hopefully, that's a bit of advice that I have for
Thank you very much. We are exactly at time. I'm very excited and learn a ton from this conversation. What I personally take away is, in terms of promising use case, name it, from better data quality, better supplier consolidation, better possibility to optimize the supplier based on this better information. And this is the start of the journey to actually do even further. The readiness is mostly dependent on the qualitative data. That is the fundamental stake that we have to start with for this journey. And last, we should not be afraid, because it's happening already, and that's just a way to free up some time to do some more value-added tasks. Huge thank you, Stephanie, for coming here. It was a pleasure welcoming you today. Thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.